Hi, I'm Londa. Subscribe to my channel here on YouTube to save yourself money and to get rid of any and all stress as you learn my how-tos for creative sewing. Today I'm finishing up a pair of black Ponte knit pants, a really slim leg. I worked several hours this morning on stitching a leg, getting it just the right amount of slim silhouette that I was looking for, and now it's time to put on the elastic waistband. Let me show you how I do it because I think it's different than you would read in almost any pattern at all. And by the way, I'm just going to apologize for the fact that the camera shakes a little bit because I'm holding it. I've got some new equipment on its way, but today is the day I'm making these pants, so I'm going to film it for you anyway. There's only one way to sew pants, and that's in your underwear. So do what you need to do to be able to sew them in your undies. And then when you have the leg and everything the way you want it, now it's time to decide on the top edge. So what I did was I simply put these on right side out, and I simply just turned under the top edge so that the very top of the pant was at a place that was comfortable on my body. So now what I'm starting to do when I thought, oh, I need to make a video of this, is to simply go around and measure 1 inch. I love this Nancy Zeman sewing gauge from Clover, one of my favorite tools. So you see I'm putting that at my chalk line, and then I'm chalking in with my chalkener. Yep, chalkener, C-H-A-K-O-N-E-R. $15. Now, I only ever use the white chalk because I know it brushes out the colors I had some poor experiences with. One of the top sellers on my website. Keep one at the sewing machine, keep one at the ironing surface, keep one at the cutting surface. That's my rule. So here I am, and I'm just going around and I have done the task that I just described to you, and here is what I cut off. This is the center back where I cut nearly nothing off, and this is how much I ended up cutting off at the center front. Now, I could take this information to my pattern and mark it on it, but honestly, this to me is just fitting as I sew, and I'm not going to bother to do that except for to make a note that I might want to cut it a little bit taller up there at the very center back. So this will slope up a little bit higher the next time I cut it out, just so that I have enough fabric. Now understand, we're not making a casing. What we're going to do is stitch the elastic, and what I have on hand is 1 inch. I would really recommend 1.5, but we're going to stitch it to the outside, to the right side of the garment, and this top cut edge of the garment is going to be flush with the elastic. So what's going to happen is just pretend that this pin indicates where it's sewn on at a scant 1/4 inch. Then what's going to happen is it's going to flip in and around and down. So do you see how it's going to look on the inside? My fabric, the top of my pant, is going to actually be wrapping the top edge of that elastic. And then I will not sew it down at the bottom end. Instead, I'll be stitching through everything at some seams to hold it up to the inside. Now, still got your thinking hat on? I've got 2 darts in the front, 1 dart in the back. This is very heavy fabric. And I've got seam allowances at the center front, center back, and sides. This is like super thick. So as I teach so often, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slash in at this uppermost top fold line and throw the fullness, the excess of the dart, the other direction. Same thing at the center front, center back, and side seams. All right, I'm over here in the good daylight by my sewing machine, and I want to show you what I've done. At what's going to be the very top edge, I have clipped into the seam allowance at the side seam. I've clipped up to the stitching of the dart, not through, but right to it, of each dart. And then, okay, since darts press towards the center front and center back, what I'm going to do in the area that's going to be really the seam allowance of this elastic application treatment. That excess, that dart fullness is going to go the opposite way, so that once it folds down into place with the elastic in between there, I've balanced the bulk. I don't have a big huge bump, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers on one side. I've got 3 layers on one side, 3 layers on the other. At a seam, I would have 2 layers on one side and 2 on the other. So I think that's a very, very important step. Here's a trick that I learned from Nancy Zeman years and years ago. Instead of overlapping your elastic ends, you butt them, B-U-T-T. You just match up the raw edges, and you see that I stitched very securely on each side, and then I did a zigzag in the middle. So now I have a complete non-twisted piece of the elastic that I measured on my body that would be comfortable to get installed as the elastic waistband on these Ponte black knit slim leg pants. Now I've trimmed away the excess so you can see exactly what I've done. Much less bulky than if I had taken one end and put it over top of the other and stitched. Far, 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 always like butted elastic. And doing it on a piece of fabric, something usually you have in your garbage can, works just great. Here's another fine point I bet you've never thought about. Alright, so I have my piece of elastic and it's butted and stitched securely, so that's the center back. If I fold it in half, this edge matches it, so that's my center front. This is one side of me and this is the other. Now, if this were 30 inches, believe me, gals, I'm not half of that in front and half of that in back. If you just put a pin in right here at the edge and say that's going to be a side seam, and same thing on the other end, believe me, that will not work. You have more fullness to you in the front than you do in the back. I haven't met a person yet who split half and half. So do you see what I've done? To even start to put this on my pant, I have gone, well, let's see, how far is it? A good ½ inch further towards the back. This will be my side seam, and same thing on the other side. Now when I go to pin this to my pant, that may have to move back even further, but I do want to make sure that I get this elastic distributed so that the fullness of the pant and the top of the pant is going to be bigger than this, because I measured this on my body to be nice and snug how I wanted it to fit. I'm going to have to be easing the pant into this elastic. At this point, I have the elastic pinned to the outside of the pant at the waist. I've matched up the center backs and the center fronts. Do you see that I made sure that I had my clips and I have the thickness of the dart going outwards and then inward? One other quick thing I forgot to say earlier was when I stitched on the elastic, I did so with a longer stitch length than normal. I'm not a fan of zigzag. Not even a skinny zigzag, because I just don't like the way it ends up looking, even from the outside of a garment, especially from the outside of a garment. A longer stitch length puts more thread in each stitch, and if it is a good polyester thread, which has stretch to it anyway, that really does give it enough stretch. I know that's not commonly shared, but people who sew on a lot of knits that I speak to, we all agree on that. The other thing is on the clipping, you've got to clip close, but you don't want to clip through your stitching. So you might want to stitch the darts and the seams twice in there to really reinforce them so that you don't end up with a little hole here where you've clipped. All right, you clip to the stitching but not through it. Ask me why I'm telling you that, especially on black. It's a little tough. And then concerning direction of seams, I generally put my side seams going towards the back. And it doesn't matter which way you have a crotch seam go, because it's going to do what it wants to do anyway. It just needs to be narrow, especially down around the very bottom of your crotch basket. I just have to say I love sewing. It's engineering. At any rate, with this very, very thick fabric, double knit, and all of this bulk, I am determining that if I trim the top edges of the dart, in this instance, at an angle to that turn back point, that will further decrease that bulk at the very top edge. So I have now done that angle trimming. You can see the little pieces here. So I will try to hold the camera phone and turn this and see what that looks like along the top edge. Oh, that's really much, much nicer. I've just never dealt with quite this much bulk. So compare that to, find another dart. Well, take my word for it, it's nicer than these others. There's not quite the amount of bulk right at this very top edge. So just a fine point when you're dealing with really, really thick fabric in this technique. Here's the next step then. I have just stitched entirely around the waistline through the elastic at 1/4 inch. I did increase my stitch length, and as you remember, I had pinned the bulk going the opposite direction. So now do you see what's going to happen? Here's a dart. When this turns in, do you see this top edge of the elastic? That's what's going to turn and become the very top edge of the pant. So the elastic is wrapped with the fabric of the garment. And this point here is where the clip is. So now this bulk is distributed. I hope that makes sense. It really does work like a charm. So now I've got equal bulk here and here. The one other thing I would add is that I always put the joining of the elastic at the center back. That way I can peek in and see, oh yeah, that's the back, because I can't remember from one garment to another which one has darts where. Sometimes I'll peer down into the crotch basket. My husband will say, what are you doing? I would say, I'm trying to figure out which is the back and which is the front. But if you put the elastic joining at the back, then that's a clear thing. Then the final step is to turn your elastic to the inside, making very certain that you're making the bulk go in opposite directions, and then you stitch in the ditch. So that's what I have just finished doing here. I've stitched in the ditch from the very top down through the depth of the elastic and back stitched at both edges, and then I'll show you what this looks like. On the inside, you can see that it's been stitched down right here. So that keeps that elastic rolled to the inside. You don't have stitching around the bottom. You don't have a bulky casing. And I just really, really like this finish. And I hope you do too. Along with this video about elastic waistlines, I thought I would just pull a couple more pieces out of my wardrobe and talk through them with you. So the installation that I've just instructed you on is shown here on this green tencel knit skirt, and it shows very clearly. This one only had side seams, and I had pressed those open, so bulk was not an issue. But I did, very honestly, for heavier fabrics, this is what I've decided I prefer to do, but I made these pants before I really thought through the problem with the bulk. In this case, I simply took the elastic. I still made it smaller as I talked you through, and divided and everything just as I talked you through in this video. But I serged it to the wrong side of the top edge, and I simply allowed the width of the elastic excess at the top edge. So after I've stretched and serged it on, then it just flips to the inside, and just as we already have done, we stitched in the ditch. But do you see on this one, I still have the bulk of that dart all going in one direction. So even with this technique, wrapping the entire waistband, I really want to come back, and in this case I will just clip along here and throw this dart the other direction. To do it properly, I would have the dart pressed the right way, and I would have thrown that clipped portion this direction. And I'm sure that makes sense. Now let's look at some ready-to-wear. This is from Coldwater Creek, and I find this quite interesting. Look what they've done. They have taken the elastic. This is the raw edge that they have serged just about 3/8 of an inch over the edge of the elastic, the wrong side of the garment to the elastic. Then that comes around, and what they did was they did a chain stitch to secure the other end of the elastic down. And then they turned it again and tacked at the different places around the waistband of the pant to hold that all in. Now I will tell you, wearing these pants, that is really quite bulky. I just always like to look inside what I consider to be good brands of ready-made clothing to see how it was done. You can always learn from looking and taking lessons and watching YouTubes from anybody and everybody, and you know the very best way? Your way. Thanks for watching. Join me for Creative Fashion Sewing, where you'll find oodles of inspiration and detailed how-tos. For a constant stream of sewing fun, follow me and subscribe to my social media channels.